the root problem of income inequality should be like near the top of our priority list. And generally speaking, it's not. I mean, it gets talked about a lot, but like, I think if we could actually address that, a lot of this other shit would take care of itself.
What's up, damn givers? Welcome to Let's Give a Damn, a podcast about people who give a damn, by people who give a damn, and for people who give a damn. I'm so glad you're here. I just made a quick list in my head, and there are 1,647,923 other things you could be doing right now, but you chose to be here learning, growing, and having some fun alongside my guests and me, so thank you so much for listening in. This week on the show, I chat with Trae Crowder, a.k.a. the liberal redneck. Trae hails from Salina, Tennessee, population 1,500. Warning right here at the onset, there is more cursing than usual in this interview. I sort of like to curse, but Trae really likes to curse. So if you don't like cursing or can't handle a ton of cursing, this might be a good one to skip. Or maybe just don't listen to it in the car with your kids on the way to soccer practice. Anyway, just wanted to give you a heads up because I love you. Trae has been doing comedy for quite some time, but his career skyrocketed a couple of years ago after he posted some videos that went viral. Especially this video that he made about North Carolina's HB 2 bill. You might remember it. Here's a little snippet of it.
What do you think is going to happen? You do know that transgender people have existed forever, right? What bathrooms you think they've been using? And how many times you ever hear about what you're worried about happening? Hardly not, never. Because even people that are child molesters are not going to prey on a kid in broad daylight, in public, especially not with their mouth-breathing troglodyte daddy 12 feet outside the door just dying to punch something different. It don't make no sense. And what about little boys? The vast majority of people that prey on little boys are adult males. This law don't affect them one way or the other. So unless you're also suggesting that we have separate bathrooms for Catholic priests, I think you need to cut the shit.
When I saw that video back in 2016, I really appreciated his creative blend of comedy and talking about important issues. Important societal and political issues have always been addressed in comedy, and Trae, in my opinion, is doing a great job at that. In this conversation, Trae and I talk about how there are more liberals in the South than you might imagine, what it looks like to work for the U.S. Department of Energy right before doing comedy full-time, what liberals get right and what they get wrong, and so much more. It was an absolute pleasure to meet and hang with Trae for a bit. I hope you'll follow him on the socials and maybe even show up for one of his live shows as a result of listening to our chat today. Also, the most LA thing ever happened while we recorded our conversation. We were at some studio in Burbank, and when we finished, the guy that runs the studio walked in and mentioned that Weird Al, yes, that Weird Al, was recording a podcast in the next studio over. I just thought that was funny. I thought it was a very LA thing to happen, and I thought it was something that I should mention to you today. Another quick reminder that this conversation contains much more cursing than usual. Without further ado, here's my conversation with the liberal redneck himself, Trae Crowder. Trae Crowder, welcome to the Let's Give a Damn podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
I'm super excited. Before we get into your comedy and your career and even the way that I first was introduced to you, before we turned the mics on, we were talking about your roots and where you came from. So let's start there because we're in LA right now and you live here now, and we'll come full circle to that. But you did not grow up here.
No.
You're in entertainment, and that seems like that'll be your trajectory for a while, but you grew up where?
It's called Salina, Tennessee. It's middle of nowhere. It's about halfway between Nashville and Knoxville, and then north 40 miles. So if you take I-40 towards Knoxville from Nashville, about halfway there, get off the interstate and go straight north toward Kentucky, and you'll hit Salina, Tennessee, where I grew up.
And there's nothing out there. There's nothing out there.
It's extremely rural. It's fun. I've my whole life, and I still will sometimes. I'll meet people from like small towns and stuff. I've gotten into so many like my hometown is smaller than yours, like pissing contests. And what it normally hinges on for me is I find a lot of times people that make that argument with me, they're from a town where it's tiny, but very nearby in the same county they're at is a bigger town that has Walmarts and all this stuff.
And
or
that's
whatever.
where they go do all their stuff.
But Salina's the biggest town in Clay County. Like, we had no bigger town. The bigger town was 50 miles away. I mean, there's no traffic lights in the whole county. There's no McDonald's or Walmarts or any. I mean, it's rural, middle of nowhere, nothing. I graduated high school with like 67 people, and that was far and away the biggest class that school system had ever had. Normally, it's like 40s, something like that every year.
The World Wide Web says that Salina has fewer than 1,500 people. Is that still
Definitely
the case?
Yeah, I'd say it's less than that, honestly. But I mean, yeah, easily that's true.
I grew up in Guatemala. We're at 2.7 million people, so a few more than Salina. Are there any pros to growing up in a place like that, or is it all? See, in my mind, like I'm a city boy. I cannot I cannot even imagine living in a place like that. But yet, so many Americans, and not just Americans, so many people all over the world do. Are there any pros to living in a place like that?
Normally, what I tell people about Clay County in particular is the one thing about it that is unassailable, in my opinion, is there's a really, really nice lake there called Del Hollow Lake. And like, so I was like a lake kid, grew up like on the water, fishing and swimming a lot and stuff. Like, summers there are cool. Like, actually, I talk shit about my hometown a lot. It comes from a place of love. I wouldn't go back there that much, but like, even living out here now, I still, every summer I go back to Del Hollow Lake. I'm going Memorial Day weekend this year. And all my buddies I grew up with, we all go out on the lake together and all that. So like, the outdoorsy part of it, if you're like an outdoorsman at all, which I'm not outside of lake type stuff, all that is great. Also, living in LA, going back home, I'm reminded of things like the air and like the stars in the sky. Like that shit will blow my mind now going back home and like how beautiful the night sky is. What, out here in LA, it's the irony of LA. It's supposed to be the city of stars, but there's not a goddamn star in the sky at night. It's weird, but that type of stuff is nice, but I didn't appreciate none of that shit growing up there. I just wanted to fucking leave growing up there.
So let's talk about you, wanting to leave, because a couple things that I noted, just doing a little research on you on the webs, was that you first family member to go to college, but definitely to get an MBA, right?
Yeah,
so
both,
so you left and sort of did something that no
one
else
else
had
go
done.
to college. I probably had a couple family members that I was the first one to finish. I was the first one to graduate college.
So graduate and then get an MBA.
Yeah,
and then you went to work for the government for a while.
The U.S. Department of Energy. Yeah, that wasn't planned. That was just
how did that happen?
I graduated business school in 2009, which was a great time to be graduating business school.
Things were looking up.
Yeah, and I went on so many interviews for like what were basically scam jobs, you know what I mean? Like MLM type stuff, or just like bullshit sales jobs that they didn't advertise as that. And then you get there and show up and you realize and it was so fucking discouraging.
I've been on a couple of those.
And I worked in the bar I worked at when I was in college. I worked at for 6 months with an MBA before I just happened to land a job with the U.S. Department of Energy at the Oak Ridge site office in East Tennessee. Also a coincidence. Wasn't that far away from me, but it could have been the one in Ames, Iowa or whatever, and I still would have went when I got the job. It just happened to be not that far away from me. But yeah, I didn't plan that. I just sort of fell into that. And then I got to Knoxville, and that's where I started doing stand-up at.
Did you leave your government job for stand-up, or was there another reason? Was there something else?
No, I left it to go full-time. In comedy. I worked that job and like moonlighted as a comedian for like 6 years, and then because those videos going viral and stuff, I was able to go full time into this, and that's why I left that job.
Do you think it would have, if the videos had not gone viral,
how
were you feeling about your career at the time?
Honestly, not that bad for where I was at, because like I'd gotten. And it's like there's two schools of thought in comedy, but so like when I was first starting and I was emceeing at Side Splitters Comedy Club in Knoxville or at or Comedy Catch in Chattanooga or whatever, I would talk to headliners that would come through, and most of the advice that I got from people was like, it takes a long time to get really good at this, and in my opinion, they would say to me, should get good here before you worry about moving. So I was like, I've been doing it like 5, going on 6 years, and was feeling pretty good about it, and was actively looking for jobs in LA. I was submitting writing packets for like TV writing jobs and stuff, but I was also looking for jobs in like the business world, like my day job world, just whatever I could get to where I could afford to live here. I was already in the process of doing that and wasn't having very much luck, but I was trying to move out here already when they went viral and I quit the job. But I was like featuring at clubs, headlining like bar shows and that type of thing. I had a manager already. I had been to this NBC writers workshop that's very competitive. They have every year. I'd gotten into that and done that. And through that, I was submitting stuff for TV jobs and that type of thing, all from Knoxville. So I I felt pretty good about it, but I knew I had to get out here. And that's what I was trying to do when everything blew up and went crazy, which also is obviously what allowed me ultimately to move out here.
Yeah. So the liberal redneck, that's what you're known as. And those two words are not typically put next to each other.
Correct.
Unless there's some anger and, some sort of shit around it, but not in a good way. So how did that sort of come together? Why liberal redneck? Why was that something that you wanted to, put together as a brand? What was behind that becoming who you are?
One of my first stand-up bits that I was like proud of, or that almost always worked or whatever, was this bit that I would do. And it's what the videos are, but I would set it up by talking about how people, even in the South, people hear my accent because it's a thick one and they think that I'm a dumbass racist, whatever. And I understand why. It's because anytime you ever see this accent portrayed, it's always the same Bible thumping troglodyte, that type of thing.
Yep.
So I get it. But I need to combat this, and all I know to do is I'm just going to go out there publicly and be just as loud and crazy and redneck as they are, but I'm going to, get my beliefs out there instead. I'm just going to be super liberal to balance the scales. And then I would do a bunch of liberal redneck examples of things. You know what I mean? My other truck's a Prius, that type of shit,
Yep.
And I did that on stage for a while, and it was like I said, it was like probably the first bit I wrote that I was proud of. And in that bit, I never said the words liberal redneck, but if I was writing up a set list for a stand-up show that I was doing, the title of that bit was liberal redneck. Like that's what I called it. So in my mind, that was the liberal redneck bit, even though I never said those words in there.
Mm-hmm.
And my close friends in comedy, they knew that, like we would talk about it. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, hey guys, that liberal redneck bit that I do? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, I've been thinking about making like a video series based around that idea. And every one of them all my comedy friends would be like, yeah, that's a good idea. You should totally do that. But like, I didn't for like 2 years. Cause in my mind, I was like, I need to save up money and buy a nice camera. I need to learn some editing software. I don't want to look like an amateur. It seemed like a barrier to entry for whatever reason. I don't know if I was just making excuses or what. And then what changed that was I saw this video one day in April 2016, and it had 15 million views, and it was all like people on the far right. And it was just a video of some preacher in North Carolina out in the woods preaching fire and brimstone about the evils of transgender people and Jesus smiting them all and all this type of crazy shit. Not a dick joke in sight. Wasn't nothing funny about it. It's just a preacher preaching shit in the woods, standing by a truck, just yelling at his phone, and it had 15 million views. And I saw that, and genuinely, it's like a light bulb went off. I was like, man, if this motherfucker, if this is what I'm making, what I want to make fun of, then I don't need any of that fancy shit.
You don't
In
need a video
fact,
studio.
that would be a mistake.
Yeah.
Like the way to do it is to do it exactly the way they do it.
Yep.
But I can go out back and yell at my phone. And so once I had that realization, I made the first one like less than a week later, and it got like 30,000 views, which is very encouraging. So I made the second one, and the second one was about the transgender bathroom laws in North Carolina, and that one ended up getting like almost 30 million views on Facebook or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's
sort of where it took off.
And that's when it,
Yeah. So before we get to the HB2 video, because that's where I was first introduced to you, what I'm interested in is when did you become, you had to be the only or one of the only liberal people in Salina. Like how did that happen? What were your influences
honestly
to become that way?
Okay. To start at the end of the question, my two number one influences were my dad and my uncle. My dad mostly raised me. Him and my mom divorced when I was 7. My mom has struggled with opioid addiction, like a lot of people from where I'm from, for a lot of her life. She wasn't around a lot when I was a kid. My dad mostly raised me. He has one brother, my Uncle Tim, and my Uncle Tim is gay and openly gay, and they were very close. They've been very close my whole life.
Also from Salina?
Yes, and my uncle, he didn't live there. He lived in Nashville when I was a kid. He lives in Salina now and has for years because my Meemaw, his mama, is, in her 80s, and Uncle Tim lives there because my dad passed away a few years ago. Uncle Tim lives there and takes care of Meemaw. But so my dad explained this all to me when I was like 9 or 10. But before that, there was Uncle Tim and Uncle Mike, his life partner. And they were at every Thanksgiving and every Christmas and whatever, as long as I can remember. I mean, like, since I was a baby, they were around. And I never thought anything of it. And when I was like 9 or 10, my dad explained to me, he's like, okay, so because he knew that it was going to start coming up, like in school and shit. And he was like, your Uncle Tim is gay. And then he explained what gay means. And he's like, and some people don't like that, but fuck those people, basically. And I was just like, okay, whatever. It didn't affect me at all because that's how kids are for the most part. They have to be told to hate somebody.
Hate and discriminate. And
right. And I've loved my uncle so much and still do. So I was just like, okay, it didn't change anything for me. But I was still going to church some at that time with like aunts and uncles and stuff on my mom's side of the family because my dad didn't fuck with the church at all, I'm assuming, because he has a gay brother. But I was still going to church some because every kid around there did. And after that conversation, I started picking up on shit at church about homosexuals and all this. And I pretty immediately was like, okay, well, I'm done with this then. And I told my dad, and he was like, yeah, that's fine. So I quit going to church when I was probably 10 or 11. And those two things, having a gay uncle and not growing up in the church like so many people around there did, are the main two things that I attribute my like liberalism to. But I will say the guys I'm still good friends with back home now that I grew up with, because we weren't on the mics yet, I don't think, but I told you every summer I go back to my hometown to ride on the lake. And I do that with like my buddies that I grew up with. Like I still am in contact with a good chunk of them. The ones that I'm still tight with now, except for like one or two of them, and those one or two guys, they're cool. But the rest of them are also liberals. Like we're all on the same page. And there's about 8 of us. But like I said, in classes of 40 something, that's really not that bad. We didn't talk about politics though growing up.
Sure.
But still, most of my good friends from back home that I'm still good friends with are on the same page as me with a lot of this shit. Believe it or not, it's not as rare as people think it is. Don't get me wrong. It's still very much in the minority, but not as much as people think.
So I first was introduced to you because of your 2016 HB2 video, right? That I don't know how it came across, probably because people were sharing it, but I saw it and I was like, holy shit. Like the whole thing, the cell phone video, your thick accent, I had no idea that it was part persona. Like it is you, but
it's just me cranked way up,
you put the accent on and I was just like, everything about it took me by surprise. The irony of us, or I don't know if irony is the right word, but the funny thing about us talking about this today is that Trump's military trans ban goes into effect today.
Okay.
So almost 14,000 trans people in our military are set to lose their jobs.
That's actually going to happen? I thought that was being like, I had surgery last week. I've been sort of out of it the past few days, but I didn't realize that was like going into effect and was going to actually like happen. Because I remember when that came up, it seemed to come up basically out of nowhere. And I felt like at the time it was one of those things that he just did that wouldn't ever really amount to anything. I didn't realize it was like happening today. That's a huge bummer.
It looks... Well, I mean, let's see.
No. I'm sure you're right. It's like I said, I've been laid up at the house.
Yeah, nearly 13,700 trans service members are expected to lose their careers as the ban begins to take effect today, including. So I don't know what the rollout is, but and I'll have to look into it more. I was actually sitting out here listening to, funny enough, Animal Farm by George Orwell, which is, I think I was doing that subconsciously in preparation for this conversation.
Right.
But I just checked on Twitter and I was like, holy shit. Like, so I'll have to look into it more. But either way, that was the first time. And you don't know this about me because we don't know each other, but I'm a Christian. and still am today for some of the same reasons that, like, you know, it was funny the way you referred to yourself as becoming the liberal redneck and like not wanting to, you actually wanted to stay in and like stay a redneck so that you could speak to what was going on more, right? Like that's sort of been my, like, because I get that. You know, and it's wild because I've wanted so many times to stop believing and to not believe it anymore because of all the shit that's going on and because of all my family members, in air quotations, all these people that share the same faith as I do, doing really horrible things to each other and to people, right? Yeah. And when I first watched your video, I was cheering you on, even though it was my people, right? It's hard to own them, right? Because I don't think we actually do share the same faith. You know, they're obviously we're not on the same page. Right. What happened in that moment? What happened after that? So that was, like you said, that was the moment that really, I mean, millions and millions of views. You got into talk shows and all sorts of things. So what sort of progressed after that? Did you sort of see like, this is a way for me to communicate my beliefs and my views on this, that, and the other in a way that it really engages with people?
I had been doing stand-up for like 6 years at that point, mostly in the South, but not entirely. I would come out here to L.A. Sometimes I'd go up to New York sometimes, or Detroit or wherever every now and then and do it. But mostly I did it around the South. And this type of stuff is always the type of stuff that I was talking about on stage, you know, because like, again, like you were saying earlier, it's a persona in that it's just me like cranked up to 11 basically, but it all comes from a very genuine place. And this is the type of like material.
Yeah, it's not satire. It's just cranked up.
It's the type of material that I've been writing like since I started. So like, I recognized when it first went viral that maybe now I would have like a platform to keep doing the type of stuff that I had already been doing or already wanted to do anyway. And the first like big thing was a tour. Like I told you I had a manager already. We set up a trial run of tour dates, like a week-long thing in like Atlanta, Nashville, Knoxville, Asheville, I can't remember, but 6 dates in 7 days around southern cities. Huntsville was the other one. And I was really sweating it. I was like, you know, there's a big difference between click and share on a Facebook video versus spending money, leaving the house, going to a show. I was like, I don't know. Ain't nobody going to buy tickets to see me just because of this. But that all sold out, all of it. And
it's amazing.
And like when that happened, I was like, okay, this might be real. So that was like the first major thing. The second major thing was we got a book deal from it, which I did not at all see coming and was very blown away by. But we got a book deal from it, and that's when I quit the day job. I would have anyway because of just the tour, but between the tour and the book deal, which both happened pretty quickly, like within the first 2 months, 6 weeks probably of the videos going viral, those two things had happened, and I quit the job, and then it was just off to the races. And then very shortly after that, I got my first TV deal with Warner Brothers, and then moved out here, and then have just been trying to keep the ball rolling since then.
Yeah, what's cool is that if people go check out your YouTube page or Facebook, which they should, is that you've sort of kept, even though your sort of persona has grown, it's not like you've hired like a video crew to follow you around for these rants, right? It's still you in your backyard or against a wall, talking about climate change, about the wall, or about rich people making more money while everybody else gets less. And I think that's really cool that you've kind of kept that persona versus like hiring some dude to like make a vlog for you.
Well, right? It's like I said earlier, like I had that light bulb moment where I was like, these shouldn't be high tech. That would be a mistake. It should be the opposite. And even though they have like evolved and they got popular and all that shit, to me, that's still like a part of it. Like that, like lo-fi aesthetic or whatever is like part of that video series because it's been there the whole time. But I mean, look, that also is like convenient and makes it easy for me because I can just set up a tripod and just do it, you know. But I genuinely do believe that though, that like that just stripped down like bare bones aesthetic is like part of it for me. So yeah, I'm not gonna change.
And it's working because there's lots of videos with millions and millions of views. You've said multiple times that you are not down with Jesus. Yeah. Because for reasons you've already talked about. You know, the church was not kind to your uncle.
I will say, and that was like the spark. once I left and I got older, I started like, asking a lot of questions and thinking of it like more critically or whatever, I guess. And from an outsider's perspective, I'd already left and just none of it was checking out for me. Like that's the thing that pushed me away. But then I got older, and as I really thought over a lot of it, none of it made sense to me. So I was never like pulled back at all, honestly.
Got it. So that was my next question was like, so are you still feel that way?
Yeah.
And
very much. But look, sometimes, well, like I've been embraced at various times wholeheartedly by like atheist communities or whatever, which is fine. Like I appreciate them supporting me or whatever, but I'm not at all hardcore in that regard. I'll make totally blasphemous jokes if I think they're funny, but I'm not passionately anti-God or anything. The way I mostly describe it to people is because I grew up pretty much a-religious, like, except for when I was a little kid, which I don't really remember.
Sure.
Grew up pretty much a-religiously. I just don't really care that much. Like, I don't want to abolish God or religion or whatever, like a lot of atheists do. Like, I don't really care what people believe as long as they don't, try to impact my life with it or force it on me or whatever. I don't believe in it, but I'm not like, I ain't going to go to the mat with a Christian over it or anything like that, because I'm just not that invested in it personally.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So obviously it's right in your persona name, the liberal redneck. So you're liberal, and you've stated that many, many times. In sort of today's environment, what do liberals get wrong that you would like to see? Like, it's a shit show right now, right?
Yeah.
Like there doesn't seem to be too many people trying to have conversations and with the other side, right?
No, go ahead.
And I'm a big fan of us all like being able to criticize our own team, as it were. It's not really a team, but yeah. Do you see your team fucking up at all in this current day and age where neither side is winning? Like, nobody can say like we're winning this, right? Like, it just depends on the day where you're like, Trump does this thing and then they do this thing, and then then the left bashes the right because so and so did something to a kid way back then, and then 2 days later somebody on the left gets accused. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just this back and forth that's just so tiring.
The two main things that come to mind immediately, the first thing is like, and you're right, we should criticize our own team. That's like a vital part of it. But you can do that and still circle the wagons. I don't feel like liberals stick together nearly, not even in the same ballpark as well as the right does. Like, they are together on their shit no matter what. And like, and to a fault. Like, they don't hold each other accountable for anything. Like, as long as you're on their team, then everything is fine. No matter what you do, as long as you're not a lefty, then you're okay in their book. And like, that's ridiculous. But the thing is, if we want to compete with them, we have to quit like cannibalizing each other as much as I think that we do. Like, liberals hold each other to way higher standards, which like philosophically is a good thing. But at the end of the day, when it comes to like winning elections, we got to stick together more, man. It was like, just as one like silly example, and I've talked about this in some of my videos and stuff before, but it's true. Early on in the whole process for me, it was 2016, nearing the election. The book was up for pre-order and stuff. In one of my videos, I made this like just silly ass joke about Bernie Sanders, who I voted for in the primary, and I like him. And I got raked over the coals for that. I got so many comments from people that were like, just cancel my book order, unsubscribe, all this shit, because I made a joke about Bernie, who I was a supporter of. But that's the type, like, that shit don't ever happen on the other side.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And so that is one problem. The other problem, and this one's more like personal to me, but I think that the left has written off a lot of this country like entirely as far as being able to reach people. Like, I think there's a huge opportunity for the left, especially with the coming storm of like automation and all this type of thing, to regain their status as the party of the working man, because that was the Democrats forever, and they've lost it completely. And I think there's a huge opportunity there, because a big part of rural America and everything is my hometown it got destroyed by the factory leaving in the 90s.
Wow.
Before that, it was a blue county, rural redneck county that was blue every election because it was a labor place. You know what I mean? It was like a working man's town, and it was blue all the time. And then and now it's hardcore red, and there's a lot of towns like mine out there, but like, and also I think that Doug Jones in Alabama, right? I think that race illustrated, and a lot of people say, well, look how insane fucking Roy Moore was, but like, I mean, yeah, that's how they are now. Most of them are that insane. So I still think that like that Doug Jones shit illustrated that like you can win in the deep South or in deep red places if you can show people that you give a shit. And a lot of times I don't think the left even attempts to pretend that they give a shit about certain parts of the country or demographics or whatever, because they think it's a lost cause. It's not worth allocating the resources to. But I'm saying I don't believe that.
Yeah, you'd be hard pressed to convince any of your people out here.
I know
that you can go there and talk to them and reason with them, let alone what you said earlier, that you've got buddies and all but one or two of them are as liberal as you are.
I know.
Right?
I had so
and
many,
that's a huge problem.
I had so many people say things to me along the lines of, or literally word for word, you're like seeing a unicorn, or I didn't know that what you are existed. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm not, like, I sell the most tickets to my shows in the South, and it's other Southerners, it's other liberal Southerners who are coming to my shows, and my biggest shows are all in the South, like, because there's a lot of, like, I talk about this a lot too, but it's true. Any general election, the electoral map, the entire South is going to be red, but the actual ratio is going to be, you know, somewhere between 60-40, 55-45 or whatever, red to blue. Well, those minority percentages that, you know, voted blue across the entire American South, I mean, that's millions of people who vote blue in every election every time. And I mean, there's a lot of us out there. We are outnumbered, and they are way louder than we are. But like, I mean, yeah, we do exist. I'm not at all unique in that way.
So what's the way forward as a country, man? Because like, so just for context for this show, it's pretty evenly split, 50-50 conservative liberal kind of listenership.
Good.
And which is really cool. And
That's
I
super cool.
I try to bring on people that are like far left and far right. We've had pro-life and pro-choice people on. We've had, you know, just all over the place, because I truly believe that, well, I'm trying to be a unifying,
right.
Like I have my beliefs, and they are progressive for sure, but I want to always be somebody that unites. But so we've got this like, crazy volatile environment that we're in. So as American people, how do we move forward in order to have the right conversations about the right things, so that we can, because I don't think people think it's possible to have a conversation with somebody and make progress on a certain issue while you don't have to go believe everything they believe,
right.
And, you know, kind of adhere to everything that they're about, and still say, how can we make this happen together?
Yeah,
right? I believe that.
I guess I have a more like philosophical answer and then a more practical one, but they're both
give us both.
They're both very difficult. Philosophically, I think one of the main things that happens that causes this whole issue with the divisiveness right now and everything, and it's true for both sides, no more on either, you know, one more so than the other. Both sides do this completely. When they encounter someone on the other side, they immediately put that person in their head on the extreme end of that
whatever that
spectrum.
Thing is. Yep.
Very
true.
They put them on the pole of the opposing viewpoint, and that immediately puts them in a more defensive position and in a position of like, you know, fuck this person, basically.
Yeah.
When in reality, most of us are not like that. Most of us, it's like, you know, it's a spectrum politically, and most of us exist somewhere, you know, in the middle of it, or at least not on the extremes, but we automatically, both sides, put whoever we're talking to on the other side in the extreme region of whatever their viewpoint is, and that's just a bad place to start a conversation from. I just, you know, other than saying, I wish people would stop doing that, I don't know how to actually fix that, but I think that is like one of the major root problems. the more practical thing, I think a lot of this shit comes down to, because again, we talked about my hometown a little bit. I briefly mentioned the factory leaving and how that changed everything and whatever. And that's a narrative around this country and everything. Like, and it's also very true in minority communities. Also, like, what's really fucking us up, in my opinion, politically, is income inequality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what's at the root of most of this. If we were taking better care of poor people of all races and belief systems and demographics and geographical locations and all of that, if we were just taking better care of poor people in this country in general, I don't think so many people would be so goddamn mad.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's all up to not just giving all the money to rich people, more tax breaks for the rich. Like, trickle down doesn't work, and it's been illustrated to not work for a very long time now.
Yeah, but we keep going back
we
to it.
keep doing it. It doesn't work, and like, that has to change. And the only way that's going to change is with some Democrats in office in positions of power to actually change it. So that's a big reason why I'm on the side that I'm on. But putting that aside, just the root problem of income inequality should be like near the top of our priority list. And generally speaking, it's not. I mean, it gets talked about a lot, but like, I think if we could actually address that, a lot of this other shit would take care of itself, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, money drives everything, right?
Right.
It can control how I feel on, in a certain day's time.
Of course.
And so, yeah, so many Democrats, I think, focus on, I'm not saying they're bad issues, but they're so focused on, things like, LGBTQ or these things.
Right.
Like, if you're LGBTQ and poor,
Right.
that is going to influence how you
Yeah.
vote or the way you look at something. If you're Mexican and poor, if you're black and poor, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's going to, money changes everything. Like, how how we feel like we're being perceived by our town, city, community, state, country, right, is going to change, which is why I think 2016 was such an upset. Is he spoke directly to people.
Yeah.
And although most if not all of them were empty promises,
Of course.
he told them exactly what they wanted
What they
to
wanted
hear.
to hear. That's exactly right.
I just saw that you interviewed Andrew Yang,
Yeah.
who I'm a big fan of. I'm actually interviewing him in New York next month.
Right on.
For this podcast. Yeah. So
guy. We got along very well.
yeah. So I mean, is some of were you already thinking about income inequality before that? How do you think about the UBI, and like, is that an answer? Is that could that help, or what do you
I grew
think?
up dirt fucking poor. So I mean, I've thought about income inequality and stuff one way or another for pretty much my entire life. But as far as like surface level, thinking of it as an issue, it's two things. I interviewed Andrew as part of this documentary that I'm contributing to right now.
Okay.
That is it's a documentary about universal basic income.
Okay.
So that's why I was with Andrew in the first place. And basically with that, with UBI in particular, when I first heard about it as a concept, which was, I don't know, not that long ago, 5 years maybe, something like that.
Same with me, yeah.
And when I first heard about it as a concept, immediately I was like, okay, well, we're going to have to do that. Because I was like, in my mind, initially, it was we're going to reach a point where we don't have any choice because of like automation and jobs going away and not ever coming back and that type of thing, like just the general progression that I saw happening with all that. In my mind, it's an inevitability that at a certain point, we're going to have a shitload of people who there is no work for, and there won't be. And what are we going to do? Like, we have to come up with something. So I was immediately on board because I saw it as like almost not even an option, like on a long enough timeline. Having said that, after I've learned more about it and researched it more, I've only become more in favor of UBI as a concept. Like, I genuinely think there's a lot of things about it that really do make sense, but I've been on board since the beginning. And the other thing as far as income inequality is there's this guy, you know who Nick Hanauer is? He's
he's got a good first name, but no, I don't.
Silicon Valley billionaire based in Seattle, but his whole thing is nowadays his whole thing is fighting income inequality. And the rationale he uses, he goes and speaks to other like his billionaire buddies and stuff. The rationale he tries to use with them is they're gonna fucking kill us. Like his like slogan is the pitchforks are coming. You know, he tries to tell other rich people, he's like, look, we push this shit too far and eventually they're gonna come for us,
Yeah.
you know, which like I agree with.
Yeah.
And that's Nick's whole thing. And I met him through he financed a series of videos I did with Attention Media about income inequality and stuff. But I met him that way, and just through talking to him about it, and Andrew and UBI and all that, it's just really risen to the forefront for me as far as like I already said earlier. I think it's like the one thing we could do that would change a lot of shit for the better.
I'm a fan of people making money and being successful, right? I think you can make millions and even tens of millions and maybe hundreds of millions without fucking someone over. But I fundamentally believe that if you are worth $1 billion, like people have gotten really hurt in the process, which is never okay, right?
Right.
So what is this with this Nick guy? I don't need to hear his whole like thesis or the premise of his position, but like what's he doing about it? So he's talking to his buddies and saying they're going to come after us, but like what's his...
He's trying to convince his billionaire friends to, you know, not be in league with the Koch brothers and not be pro trickle down economics, and because I mean, you know, fucking billionaires. I mean, they're really the ones who make the damn laws in this country. He's trying to convince them to make different ones, to tax the rich more, you know. But he's like one of the only ones.
I'll have to look into him.
Who feels that way, you know. So like, I mean, he's fighting an uphill battle, but he's trying. But there's so many common sense points to be made about it. Like the big ones to me is like, I just don't see how anyone could argue with this. You give more money to a rich person and it goes in some offshore bank account, or it goes into oil futures or some other nebulous high finance wizardry that doesn't even make sense to most of us. If you put more money in a poor person's pocket, it goes to fucking eggs and, you know, getting tires, medical like it goes straight back into the economy because it has to. Because they need it. And then that's what we want, right? We want more money going back into the economy. We'll give it to poor people because they spend it, because they don't have a choice. Nothing about the opposing argument, you know, in favor of trickle down, like makes any goddamn sense to me.
No, it's trickle up, man.
But
I love how Andrew talks about that. Yeah,
but I don't know.
We'll see.
We will see.
You obviously have a pulse on things that are going on, and you use it in your comedy and in your career. So what do you foresee happening in 2020? I mean, we already have, 1,457 Democratic candidates that have announced that they're running.
They're all chomping at the bit, man.
Yeah, right. And we're not even, I don't think we're probably seeing the last of them. And there's just so many already. So what do you, do you think we're going to fuck up again and Trump's going to get back in, or?
I mean, maybe. I will never again underestimate the Democratic Party's ability to fuck up, to fumble the ball, you know, because, I mean, we've proven time and time again that we're very capable of that. But like you said, we got this deluge of candidates right now. I like that. I think that's a good thing. I think competition's always a good thing. That will encourage some, you know, real debate and, you know, and like analysis by people and people forming their opinions, everything. And hopefully, you know, the cream will rise to the top, and out of that, we will find the right person. I think that can happen, and I hope that happens. And if we do find the right person, then, I mean, surely, because, okay, here's the thing. Even though I'm from the rural South, and I was still in the South during that election and everything, and I saw the Trump signs, and I was beating the drum telling people, like, you know, look, there's a real thing going on here because of towns like mine. You know, like you said, he's telling them what they want to hear. Like, he's selling this shit to these people. I was saying all that. I still, at the end of the day, was like, but he ain't going to fucking win, though. You know, like, this is scary. We need to pay attention to this, but he ain't going to win. That's pretty much where I was at. I mean, I was shocked and blindsided and devastated.
Did you find out that night, or did you wait till the morning?
I was supposed to go on ABC News's coverage for just like a brief thing, because I had just done Nightline, and one of their like producers on there they had been talking to me like, hey, we're going to Skype you in like after
Hillary wins.
Exactly. Yeah. We're going to Skype a bunch of people, just a circle jerking victory party or whatever. And it kept getting pushed further and further back, and the tenor of the emails kept, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, well, you know, and it got to be like 1 a.m. and whatnot. And then it finally got called, and they were just like, yeah, we're all just saying fuck it, you know, or what, basically. But but I was up and watching and then live the whole time. And so because of that, I hesitate to just be like, oh, yeah, we got this shit, But I do think a huge part of what happened, that whole narrative of Trump reaching working class people and all that there's truth to that and everything. But at the end of the day, to me, what really happened was Democrats didn't get out the vote the way that they had done before because there was a lot of reasons. Hillary wasn't.
But they thought it was in the bag. They thought they had in the bag.
That is the main reason, in my opinion. A shitload of liberals, and I knew a lot of them personally, thought there was no way he would ever win, so they could keep a clean conscience and sit at home and not vote for Hillary, who they didn't really like, and it would be fine because it wouldn't matter. And then they got punched in the fucking mouth in November of that year. And now that has happened, I really, really don't believe that most of them will make that same mistake again. Meaning that, like, even if Bernie's back in it, all his people will be back in full force. If he doesn't get the nomination, which, like, gun to my head right now, I don't think he will. And if he doesn't, this time, I think they'll go and vote for whoever it is that does get it because of what happened last time. And to me, as long as that is true, then yes, we are going to win, in my opinion. But like I said, never underestimate our ability to fuck
I hope we
up.
can just approach it with a lot more just humility and like the gravity of this, because there was such a lightheartedness around it. Like
laughing at him, just like
100%. I mean, in I'll be honest, like I took part in some of that because I
did too.
I just did not believe. I mean, I've spent I grew up overseas, so I wasn't here during my childhood for most of it. Came back, spent 5 years traveling the world, and finally came back around 25. Got married and was here now like I live here. Even now, 10 years later, then 7 years after coming back here full time, I just could not believe that was actually a thing that could happen. So, yeah.
Well, dude, look, to be clear though, like, and I tell people this a lot, like, I grew up in a tiny little deep South town.
Sure. Yeah.
And I didn't believe that was a thing that could happen.
Yeah.
Like, these people, like in my hometown now, with Trump signs everywhere and all, like, they were not like that. Like plenty of racists around. They didn't like gays because of the church or whatever. But politically speaking, they were mostly apolitical. Like growing up there as a kid, what I remember, like as far as politics goes with like, these rural Americans that I grew up around, it was mostly like, fuck them, they're all full of shit. You know what I mean? Like as far as politicians go.
Right. Pretty much. They
weren't passionate about any of the political sphere, generally speaking. And now fucking everybody's rabid,
Yeah.
And I mean, it's wild to me too. And I grew up in the thick of it. In fact, it's maybe more wild to me, especially because it's Donald Trump. This is I didn't mention this earlier, but one of the main reasons I couldn't believe it is because, and I said this on Bill Maher's show, and when I said it at first, he was like, really? But yes, 100% really. I guarantee you, if you went back in time and polled your stereotypical rednecks, if you went back in time to before Trump like started the birther shit, when he was just famous for being a rich douchebag, he wasn't in politics yet.
Right.
If you went back to then and polled stereotypical rednecks, what do you think about Donald Trump, generally speaking? It would have been almost universally negative.
Yeah.
They would have said he's a silver spoon, blue blood Yankee that thinks he's smarter than everybody, thinks he's better than everybody, and needs his goddamn ass whipped. That's what they would have said.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the antithesis of like
everything that they
are. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when I first saw him like getting popular with them, I was like, fucking
That's
what?
mind-blowing. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, are y'all shitting me right now? Like this guy? And my only explanation for that is that that's just how desperate they were for somebody to tell them what they wanted to hear. That they were so desperate for that even that dude was good enough, like satisfied it for them. It's like taken as a given now, but that shit was insane. If you know those people, that is fucking crazy that they lined up to bat for that dude the way they did.
Yeah. Even with any support that he got earlier in the race, I think the Democrats should have paid more attention to that and said, oh, he's communicating. Like the fact that anyone was following him, in my opinion, the fact that anyone was, like it came out that the way that he talked about women, he admitted he went into dressing rooms of the girls at pageants, underage girls, and saw them naked. And like he said this out loud.
Yeah.
And Christians and people were still supporting. So we
I have a go ahead. I want to ask you a question.
Yeah,
in a
sure,
minute,
sure.
But go ahead.
They should have paid more attention to any support that he was getting, and even sent people to those places and said, like, what's going, like, honestly, why? Like, what is he saying that we're not? We want to learn from you. And that never happened.
Right.
Because
they wrote those places off completely. That's what I was saying earlier. Like, I mean, that's a real thing that really happened.
Yeah.
And it was a huge mistake on their part. But what I wanted to ask you,
question, go.
As a Christian, one of the other most insanely mind-blowing parts of the whole process to me was how the Christian right embraced him, because that was like one thing that I would say for Donald Trump. I'd be like, this guy's one of the most full of shit people on planet Earth, and even he doesn't act like he's a good Christian. You know what I mean? Like that wasn't even a drum he was beating during the campaign. Like even that duplicitous motherfucker wouldn't really even attempt to present himself as godly. And yet there's so many clips of these big like televangelist types or whatever talking about how we've got a holy man back in office. You know what I mean? Like Barack Obama went to that church in Charleston after that shooting happened and led the choir in Amazing Grace, and he's a fucking secret Muslim Kenyan communist.
Yep. Donald
Trump,
faithful to one wife, raising two kids, no scandals.
Exactly. Yep. Donald Trump is the opposite of that in every way, and now Obama leaves, Trump comes in. Thank God we've got a holy man back in office again. Please explain that to me. Like, what? How do they say that shit with a straight face? And how does their congregation, like, yeah, totally. Like, it's crazy.
Mostly, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
No, like, genuinely, I don't know. People, I won't rat anyone out here, but people that are very close to me that have taught me the opposite of everything that he is about for my entire life.
Yeah.
Voted for him.
Right.
So the two things that I can pick up on from talking to so many people about this that did vote for him in 2016 that say that they are Christian. Two issues. One is, I would say, split half and half. Some of them weren't super fans of Donald Trump, but they hated Hillary so much.
Right.
They hated the Clintons so much.
Yeah.
Someone very close to me, I was talking to them not 1 or 2 weeks before the election, and they were still planning on voting for Trump. So we had a conversation. And this person genuinely believes that the Clintons have had, 60-something people killed.
Right.
Right? So, and a bunch of other things, just like all these things about the Clintons. I mean, somehow the Clinton-Lewinsky thing was more horrifying to them than all of this stuff that Trump had done, right? And then the other thing, I think, which is the greater thing, is his stance on pro-life. That is a deal breaker for so many people. It doesn't matter. I mean, he could come out and say the worst, and he has, the most horrible things about
but he like puts little kids in cages though.
Yeah, I know.
Like that's not,
I know.
That shit ain't pro-life.
No, it's not. It's truly, they should stop using that, because pro-life would be from, conception to grave, right? You care about people all throughout.
They only care about them until they come out.
Yeah, they're anti-abortion. I had this conversation with somebody the other day. I said, man, if that was true, if you look at the amount of, forget the amount of Christians, the amount of churches, people, a group of people that call themselves Christians and they gather together, right? If you take every church in America, they could, in one fell swoop, eradicate the foster and adoption queues. Right? There's hundreds of thousands of kids in the foster care system being tossed around from home to home to home, right? And then there's tons of kids that need to be adopted. They could wipe it out in one fell swoop, right? But they don't. They're full. These systems are chock full. And so for so many, it's very easy to say what you just said, because I think it is true for so many of them. You don't care what happens to them after they come out. You just want them to get here because you think this is the worst and most tragic sin. And we can have a conversation about, I grew up, there's not enough time to talk about where I stand on the issue, but it is not anywhere near there. And I have these conversations with people that are part of my community, part of my background, that is the make or break issue. He could be Satan himself, but if he says, I'm anti this and I'm going to fight against the left and the liberals on this issue, they have like, take my money, take anything. You've got it
Right.
all. And so I think it was for the people that I know, it was two things. It was anti Clintons, and it was anti-abortion, pro-life
Yeah.
movement. So that's all I can say.
Yeah.
But it's wild.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wild that people that say, if you look at Jesus, there's a lot of like really crazy things in the Bible, but it's really hard to argue with who Jesus was, right? Because
Right.
he's just again, you can like look at the Old Testament and some weird stuff, like there's some crazy shit in there that I have to really wrestle through as a Christian. But like with Jesus, like if you say I follow Jesus, like he's my role model, he's completely opposed to all of this.
All of it.
All of it. I mean, he said, welcome the stranger. He talked about the foreigner all the time. He talked about welcoming the stranger. He talked about the kids. He talked about all these women. Some of his closest people that he kept around him were women, and yet most Christians don't have the high view of women as they should. Yeah, there's just so many things that are opposed to
The trickle down thing too.
trickle down.
They should be. They should all be completely against that.
Yeah.
But if if you're looking,
They
at
should have a very-
if Jesus could tell them,
They should have a
personally
very
how he
critical
feels
view,
right?
of
course.
rich people.
Because again, a religious growing up.
Yep.
Was it actually Jesus who said, or one of his disciples or whatever? But the thing about it's easier to fit a camel through the eye of a needle,
Yeah.
than for a rich man to get into
Yeah,
the gates of heaven.
he said
or
those
whatever.
words.
Right. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. So like,
And the rich young ruler, which is a big story as well, he came and he said, leave everything and come follow me. And the rich young ruler said, nah, and
Yeah.
walked away.
I know it blows my mind because like I really try to be like as a pinko lefty whatever. I try to be like consistent. You know what I mean? Like and so
Yeah.
I like just the hypocrisy that I from where I'm sitting that I see like on the other side of the fence, not just with the religious part, just not just Christians, but just with so much of it. That's like one of the main things for me. I can't
hard.
wrap my head around the like cognitive dissonance or whatever, how they don't realize the like double standards that they have for almost everything, like seemingly, it's-
Yeah, it gets pretty wild.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping that in this next year and a half before the 2020 election that we can, from both sides, and that's what I mean. I am tirelessly working to try to bring people together. Like, so you have an issue with this for this side, and we have an issue with you on that side. Let's have a meal.
Yeah.
I did this a few months ago in my home in Nashville. Around the table, we had several staunch Trump supporters. We had a libertarian, a couple liberals. We actually had one of my friends who's an Iraqi Muslim refugee who he and his family were coming to the U.S. on the day the Muslim ban went into effect, and they got sent back. Finally made it here,
Damn.
but they were in the airport in Cairo and said, "You can't get on this plane."
Oh.
He just banned you. So we're all at the table, and we had the best conversation.
Yeah.
3 hours of food and drink. I was late to my next meeting that night because it just like went on and on.
That's normally what happens. Like when I go back home, and like I said, I do every year at least once, sometimes twice a year, go back home to like hometown home. And
Yeah, right.
I'll invariably end up in a conversation. I told you most of my friends are on the same page as me, but not all of them. I'll invariably get into some political conversation or whatever with people that are opposed to me in my hometown. And almost every time, it goes very well.
Yeah.
Like it might start out with, they've seen one of my videos or something, and be like, well,
Yeah.
I can't believe you said that shit about, whatever.
Right,
and then
right,
I'm like,
right.
well, hear me out, man. And then
Yeah.
and then 5 minutes later, we're talking about it in a totally,
Yep.
amicable way, and it's like a good conversation. And that's how I had the realization I said earlier about how we automatically put the other person
Oh, yeah.
at the far end of the spectrum. You start actually talking to them, you realize like, okay, you're not that far out there, and you now know that I'm not that far out there either. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, and I think that's true just for the political situation in this country in general. It's like it seems like we're more divided now than we ever have been, but on a person-to-person level, that is mostly not true. Like most of us are just trying to do our thing. You know what
And I
mean?
think
Like,
social media is really fucking us up too. Like
Absolutely.
90% of political conversations on social media escalate to the nth degree.
Right.
90% of conversations about the same exact topic in person go super well. Not that not that you're like, oh, you convinced me, but we can talk about it.
Right.
And we can clink a beer mug, on it, and we can spoonful food into our mouths while we're talking about it. And it just goes way better.
Yeah.
It just goes way better. Okay, I have one big last question, but
Okay.
before I get there, for anybody that's meeting you for the first time on this podcast, what do you want them to go look up, see, follow? I know you're on tour right now.
Yeah. So all my like videos and social media presence, or Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, whatever, it's all like just my name. So
Trae Crowder.
Trae Crowder. And you'll find all of that way. If you want to come to a show, which would be great, I tour with 2 other liberal Southern comedians, and the tour is called the Well Read, R-E-D, Well Read Comedy Tour. So it's wellreadcomedy.com for tickets and merch and all that type of stuff.
You also have a podcast called the Well Read Podcast?
The Well Read Podcast also, yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so you're not, last question, you don't, describe yourself as a humanitarian or a philanthropist or whatever. You're a comedian. But you obviously give a damn, which is why I've been trying to get you on for a while, because you could be making jokes about so many things, but if people go on your page, like, it's very clear that you give a shit about the future of our country and planet and us as people, right? So years from now, you're going to die. We're all going to die. In this hypothetical scenario, I've been asked to give your eulogy. So you're gone, and all of your loved ones are packed into this humongo room to honor and mourn your life. What do you hope that I would say about your life and legacy on that day?
God damn. That I tried to be empathetic always, and, treat and deal with my fellow man the way that I would like to be dealt with. And that, and I don't know how well this will have gone by that time, if it is years down the road, hopefully. But that I helped to change the perspective on where I'm from, the South in general, which is that is important to me, and that's sort of been kind of, I guess, my mission since before I started comedy even, was just to let other people know that the South is not a monolith and that we're not all the worst, basically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that there's good people there and good things about it. And I feel like I've done some of that, and that is sort of like the core thing that's behind most of what I do. Honestly, all my political beliefs are what they are, and they are authentic. I don't like that this is my stance, but it's my genuine opinion. I don't really think comedy moves the needle very much with politics. I know that's like a thing that gets brought up a lot. I'm not a believer in that, but I do think it allows people to think about things that might be difficult subjects, and they can laugh about them or whatever. But I don't think comedy like changes minds when it comes to like gay rights or any like major political issues. But I do think that I can change people's opinions of like, what somebody with my accent is or is not or whatever. You know what I mean? Like just by doing that same thing.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking back on your HB2 video, the very first one that I saw, kind of going full circle here, like in 2 minutes. Yeah, I don't think you changed many minds necessarily, but in 2 minutes you sort of cleverly and with a cuss word here and there, and like you presented a pretty well-rounded argument bashing it and how ridiculous it was in 2 minutes, right? Somebody might have taken 45 minutes to give a lecture on that. But you know what I'm saying? Like, so in 2 minutes, the kind of, I chuckled, and then I was like, oh shit, like that's so true. In 2 minutes, so many things happened that you wouldn't be able to do sitting in a lecture hall, listening to, so-and-so pontificate about the HB2 in North Carolina and how is this going to actually happen? And like, one thing that you brought up in there was like, trans people have been around for forever, like forever.
Right.
They've been in your bathrooms.
Right.
You have peed and pooped right next to them before. Like that's happened. And nothing's happening as a result of it. Now you're just aware of it. And now you're.
Yeah. It was it was a problem or an issue that was like fabricated wholesale out of thin air.
Yeah.
And they do that shit sometimes. But I'll also, hopefully in this scenario, this will be the theme of it, that you thread throughout talking about all my amazing award-winning accomplishments in TV and film and all that. And that I was, number one, hopefully was a good father and husband and all of that.
That's wonderful.
But honestly, I'm not worried about that part. I know the husband, I hope so. I hope I can keep that going. But as far as being a dad, I'm not worried about that. I'm more confident in my abilities in that regard than
that's awesome
in anything else. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I appreciate you so much. Thanks for joining us on the show today. This was super fun.
Thank you, Nick. I'm glad you had me, man. It was a good time.
Dear friends, thank you so much for listening in. I hope you are encouraged and challenged today after listening to our chat and by something that Trae said during our chat. And I hope you chuckled a few times also. Please follow Trae on social media at Trae Crowder, that's Trae Crowder, on all social media platforms. Also, check out his website, TraeCrowder.com, and see if his comedy tour is coming to a city near you by visiting wellreadcomedy.com. That's WELLRED comedy.com. I'll have all these links in the show notes, of course. Speaking of show notes, you can find more information on this podcast conversation and all of Let's Give a Damn by going to letsgiveadamn.com. If you love what we're doing on this show, please tell a friend. Leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, or consider throwing a coffee cup's worth of dollars our way each month to support the production and execution of this show by visiting patreon.com/letsgiveadamn. This podcast episode, as always, was produced by yours truly and Chad Snavely, an amazing fella from Nashville, Tennessee. The music is by our wonderful friend Propaganda. Make sure to check out all his music on Spotify or wherever you listen to your music. I simply cannot wait to spend more time with you next week. Thanks for showing up this week. Love you all. Bye.